You know, what I believe that America is suffering from right now in this moment is a deep failure of imagination. That is what got us to this place, is that we could not possibly wrap our minds around the idea that fascism and autocracy, which has been visited upon by many, many other nations around the world, would never find itself at our doorstep. And why is that? Why could we never imagine that Americans would be visited upon by an autocrat who took not an oath to the Constitution to defend us from enemies, domestic and foreign, but instead took their cues from a dictator across the pond? You see, American exceptionalism, folks, is what has blinded many Americans from believing that what is happening in this country right now is actually happening because for whatever reason, many Americans thought that they were better than the rest of the world. And lo and behold, we find ourselves here in a mess of our own creation. Welcome, friends, to the Danielle Moodie Show. Let's get into it. You see, folks, from the beginning, when we enter into elementary school, kindergarten, we are indoctrinated into believing that America is the best of the best. America is the shining beacon on the hill. America is who goes around the world as the arbiters of democracy. That our shores are where the home of the brave come to rest their heads after fighting valiantly on behalf of the millions of Americans that are at home. We are taught this, and many have called it American history. I will call it what it is: indoctrination. Because you see, America isn't better than any other country. America has more resources. America has had better PR. But when it comes down to it, when you pull away the lies, when you rub out the rose colored hue, America begins to reveal itself as a nation that, like all other nations, is deeply flawed, that has done a incredible job of burying and erasing its history and bad deeds by each and every generation. We find ourselves in this position with America's first dictator because we always believed and were told that only the righteous men would want to run for office. Only those with deep patriotism could possibly cross the threshold into the Oval Office. It never occurred to us in all our ages and all 44 presidents before him that Donald Trump could exist and would exist. And it wasn't just the failure of imagination of our forefathers that did not create the guardrails and the escape hatches that we are so desperately now in the midst of crisis looking for. But it was also a failure of imagination of the American people that got swept up in the greed is good of the 80s and into the pull yourself up from your bootstrap mentality and the hyper capitalism that converged with reality TV, where everything became a product, including people, that wealth would become America's real idol, as is fame. And that when those two things converged, that patriotism, democracy, and our thoughts of we the people would be pushed to the edges, would fall by the wayside. Even right now, as we are watching the most heinous things come across our screens, the images that Donald Trump and his regime want us to see, want us to either revere or be repulsed, but either way, they are putting on a show. They are putting on a show of false strength so that the rest of us will be put in our place. They want us to believe that the man pictured here is some type of hardened criminal. But to be honest, how would we even know? They haven't been put through due process before they were put onto those planes and put into the theatrics of Trumpism. Tom Homan, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, they're telling us these are the criminals that Joe Biden let into the country. Well, if you are correct, then wouldn't we all be on your side in believing that we want America to be safe? I can't think of a person around that would say, no, please. The Statue of Liberty said, bring me your criminals, your rapists, and your murderers. To ye shore. No. But the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump and Tom Homan and J.D. Vance and the rest of the Trump regime sycophants have no idea who these people are, and they don't care. They are brown. They are male. Some of them tattooed. So by virtue of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, they could give a shit whether that person is a gardener or a gangster. Because in their minds, there's no difference between the two. Because no one has any real credible claim to asylum unless you are, of course, white or a sex trafficker or a rapist like the Tate brothers that they just brought back into this country from Hungary, where they were going to stand trial. But they have the complexion for the protection. And these men, who we will never know who they really were and are, as their families try desperately to figure out where in El Salvador they are in these work camps and concentration camps, some of the most vile on the planet. These men have been kidnapped and disappeared. And what Donald Trump's regime wants you to understand is you could be next. Here's a little bit about some of the men. The men sent to do hard labor in a Salvadorian prison with no due process include a tattoo artist seeking asylum who entered legally, a teen who got a tattoo in Dallas because he thought it looked cool, a 26-year-old whose tattoos his wife says are unrelated to a gang. But what is the Trump response to these truths? We're not stopping. Trump border czar vows deportations to continue despite court orders. Because what did Tom Homan say? I don't give a damn what the courts think. Not only that, but they are working to try and get that judge impeached. And in a rare, shocking display of a spine, Chief Justice John Roberts woke up from his slumber to say to Donald Trump, yeah, no, you can't just impeach someone because you don't like the opinion that they offer. That coming from the man who gave Donald Trump absolute and total immunity. So you told him that he could do whatever the hell he wants. You gave him that decision signed, sealed, and delivered from the MAGA extremist bench. But now that you realize that he doesn't want to listen to you either, or judges like you, now you want to issue some type of rare opinion? Well, I'm sorry, Chief Justice John Roberts. The fascist horse has already left the stable. And you gave it the swift kick in the ass that it needed to have a head start. Because what we know now is that there is no recourse. Because the courts don't have their own lawyers. I mean, their own law enforcement. Are they going to arrest Tom Homan? Are they going to issue arrest warrants for Donald Trump and JD Vance for defying a court order? No. They're going to ask nicely for Donald Trump to appear before court. And do you know what he's going to say? Fuck off. And I'm sure that they'll continue to ask nicely over and over again until they just give up. And model to the rest of us that, yes, we're not in a constitutional crisis. It's done. It was done when the Supreme Court gave Donald Trump immunity and then reelected him so that all he has to do is provide those little pocket pardons to his people. But we don't even need to be concerned with pardons because it's not as if we're ever going to have a court system that brings them up on charges anyway. So here's where we are. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, doubled down on the administration's mass deportation campaign on Monday, saying he plans to continue the aggressive roundups and removals despite court rulings and injunctions halting them. Quote, we're not stopping. I don't care what judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming. In recent weeks, several judges have put a halt to some elements of the deportation effort, including a federal judge on Saturday who ordered that planes carrying suspected Venezuelan gang members be returned back to the United States while on their way to El Salvadorian prisons. Newsflash, the planes fucking landed, and those people are never to be heard from again. Because as the Barbie bobblehead in the White House press secretary, aka the White House press secretary, said, well, the judge gave a verbal order, so it wasn't a written order. And by the time the written order came, the planes were already in the sky and in international air, so oopsies. They are legitimately playing in our faces. They know exactly what they are doing. They know that the courts have no way whatsoever to enforce the decisions that are coming down unless they're going to what? Hold them in contempt and round them up? I doubt that that is going to happen. No one has any teeth here. So, what's next? I mean, look at this. When one of the sisters of one of the men that was rounded up, Selenier said an ICE officer told her that her brother was detained because of a tattoo that linked him to Tren de Aragua, a violent gang with Venezuelan prison origins that has spread through the Americas. She said the tattoo depicted a rose and that he had gotten it in a tattoo parlor in Dallas. Quote, he thought it looked cool, looked nice. He didn't have any other significance, she said, stressing that he was not a gang member. These men were rounded up wherever they were because of their melanin and because of tattoos. No one ran a background report. Nobody ran a criminal report. Nobody fingerprinted them or held them anywhere inside of the United States until they figured out what was what. No. They picked these men up. They kidnapped them. They shaved their heads. They put them in sweats. Staged their military folks on a tarmac, got all their drones in place and cameras in place, and then sent them out of the country. Like, do we understand how fucking crazy this shit is? And that they keep going, right, for the low-hanging fruit, those that they think they just throw around. Who said that these people were gang members? Were they put in a lineup? Did somebody point out that they were gang members? You're going on the word of Donald Trump to decide whether or not these people are from a gang? He thinks that anyone who is brown or black is a gang member. So once they round up all of the brown folks, then they come for the black folks, then they come for the trans folks, all based on what? Vibes? This shit that is happening from Mahmoud Khalil to now hundreds, folks, hundreds of men. I'm not even sure if they were Venezuelan. I don't even know. Like, I want you to look back at this picture for a moment. Like, we don't even know who these military personnel are that are getting off of these planes that are American military. Their fucking faces are covered. For all we know, those people, a part of Donald Trump's MAGA theater display, are the people from January 6th that he pardoned. You know how they always talk about the left getting crisis actors and all of the lies that they tell, whether it's a school shooting or some other natural disaster, that, oh, it's crisis actors? Has it ever occurred to us that once again, that is projection and that is what they do? Because, folks, how do we know who these quote unquote American law enforcement officers are, if they are actually law enforcement officers, or if they were not, much like the blacks for Trump during the campaign, just folks that are paid to fill in a spot? We need to wake up. Because, like I continue to say, they go for the low hanging fruit first. They go for the lightning rods first. So he's going to choose Mahmoud Khalil because for some people in American, his beliefs are just too much to stomach, that, Palestinians are actual human beings that deserve, right? Self-determination and a place to call home. So you pick someone that only 14 Democrats signed a letter in saying that he should be released because, guess what? There are no actual criminal charges that this White House is pressing against him. They resurrected a zombie act that said the president can do what he wants with whom he wants if he thinks that there is a threat. You did not have to, as a Democrat or representative, believe in what Mahmoud Khalil was saying or protesting about. That's not the point. The point is that when your body is on this soil in this fucking country, that regardless of your citizenship status, you have the right to free speech. You have the right to assembly. That's what our Constitution says. It doesn't have caveats. So the Democrats that chose to keep their mouths closed and not to sign on to this letter are going against the very oath that they supposedly took. You see, in the last couple of years, we have watched how white nationalist groups have gained more courage and fire coming out of the shadows because they see themselves in Trump and Trump sees himself in them. That they have found kinship and an allegiance. So you see them marching down main streets with their faces covered and their hateful flags and regalia. But guess what, folks? Regardless of my deep contempt for their ideology, our Constitution gives them the right to do so, so long as they are not harming anyone. So whether or not you like what is said is not the point. The point is you have a right to say it. We are not in a slippery slope. We are head first inside of fascism. It looks like massive propaganda. It looks like calling everyone an enemy that disagrees with you and saying that they are criminals without any evidence at all. It looks like the supposed opposition just going along for the get along because they need to keep up with the illusion that somehow our democracy is still in place. It's not. We aren't just here because of Democrats and Republicans. Like, we're here because Americans had a failure of imagination as to what would happen if we didn't remain vigilant about preserving and expanding our democracy. So you get right now folks like this, who is Chuck Schumer, going on a talk show scramble this week to defend his terrible fucking vote that allowed the Republican CR to continue. Folks, like, I don't know about you, but I do know that
and we've seen it described as a civil war, as a train wreck. Many Democrats believe, if you have a government shutdown that will force President Trump and Republicans to the negotiating table, why not use your vote to push back and fight?
Because the idea that they would go to the negotiating table is they don't do it. This is a new group. This is not the old group. Let me explain. I knew when I took this vote there'd be a lot of protests, but I felt I had to do it for the future, not only of the Democratic Party, but the country. Because here's as bad as that CR bill was, and it was bad, a shutdown is 10 times worse. Let me give you what happens.
Been blamed on the Democrats.
And you're right, Gail. But can I just explain what?
But you had been saying you were not going to vote. I think people were upset with you, and people are very upset with you because you had led people to believe that, no, I'm going to vote against.
Okay, well, let me explain why first the shutdown is terrible. People ought to know that. The executive branch, in this case, Musk, Doge, and this horrible guy Vogt, who have no concern for working people, would have had sole power to determine what opens and what closes. They determine what is essential. You can't go to court. So on day 2, get rid of SNAP and food for hungry kids. It's not essential. Day 4, get rid of mass transit aid. Let New York City do it. Not essential. Cut back on Medicaid and health care. Within 2 weeks, everyone would have been howling. Furthermore, it's even worse. It has no off-ramp. Guess who determines when we leave the shutdown? The Republicans. And let's not forget how bad they are. This guy Vogt, probably the most evil man. He's the guy who came up with that Project 2025.
Yes.
Yeah, he has a whole playbook of what to shut down. So they had said, one of the Republican senators who knows said to us, you'll be in the shutdown for 6 to 9 months till we totally destroy the federal government. So the shutdown was a much worse alternative. I knew I'd get a lot of flack.
But Senator,
I took some bullets from other people.
And you're still taking bullets, but should you have let people know you're thinking ahead of time? Because really, people thought...
The problem was it came so fast. Hakeem and I had a strategy, which was to try and get a bipartisan bill, which meant in the House, the Republicans would have not been able to pass it. Only at the last minute did it happen that they all voted for it. And so Patty Murray tried to get that bipartisan bill on Wednesday. That's why I said we didn't have the votes yet. They pulled out Wednesday night, and Thursday we had 2 bad choices. But I assure the public, a shutdown would have been the greatest disaster we have to put the government in the sole hands of the evil, nasty, nihilistic people like...
Is that right? So whose hands is the government in right now after your vote? Whose hands is it in? Did his vote remove the government from the nihilistic hands of Doge and Trump? Did his vote do anything to ensure that they're not going to gut Social Security or Medicaid or SNAP? Did his vote do anything to help the American people? The answer is no. The answer is that we have already been in a government shutdown for the last 50 some odd days since Donald Trump became president. In those less than 60 days, roll back on the EPA, shut down USAID, took away funding from universities, taking away funding from SNAP, shutting down Social Security, right? Like shutting down the Department of Education, making it show so that like people will not receive their Social Security checks in a few weeks. What is it that Chuck Schumer's decision to sell out Hakeem Jeffries and the rest of the House Democrats that had come to a unified decision not to let this shit pass? What is it that has changed because of Chuck Schumer's vote? I can tell you what has changed. Democrats gave up what little leverage that they had. Because while Gail said, oh, well, if the government had shut down, it would have been on Democrats. Would it have been? Democrats don't run the government right now. Republicans do. So the shutdown would have been on them because Democrats would have had a narrative to go out on the road on if the government had been shut down. They could have said, we are willing and we are here to come to the table and create a bipartisan budget for the American people, but that's not what the Republican Party wants. Tell them what you want. But that is not what Chuck Schumer did. So let me tell you something. If you've made a good decision, you don't need to go on a fucking junket to defend that decision because everybody would have already been applauding you. But the fact that you've had to postpone your book tour, but have used your airtime to go on there and try and tap dance for the American people to convince us that what you did was in service of us and not in service of your donors who asked for a fucking bailout because the markets were such shit and were falling further because of fears of a government shutdown. Like, let's call a spade a spade. Like, if you're going to stand 10 toes down on bullshit, then fucking stand 10 toes down on bullshit. But don't piss on our legs and tell us that it's raining outside. It is just like, honestly, beyond any of us at this point that thinks that any of these people who have been in government for the last 4 decades give a fuck about doing anything other than securing their sunset years. These are the same people that when AOC introduced legislation that would make it so that members of Congress weren't able to trade stocks on shit that they know, that they have inside knowledge about, that no one really wanted to sign it. Because guess who has the Tesla stocks and the Amazon stocks and the Meta stocks? Folks, for years, when people would tell me Democrats and Republicans, they're just two wings on the same bird, I would push back. Because in my heart of hearts, I genuinely believed that Democrats had better values. But they were always willing to settle for crumbs rather than go after the whole pie. Because to be honest, those people who made those statements about being two wings of the same bird were correct. And you are seeing it play out right now. And you know how we should have always known? Because when the squad, right, those 5 women of color were elected in midterm elections in the 2018 when Democrats regained the House. And we saw AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and others that were able to win their seats. And we saw the way that the right came after them, not only with deepened misogyny, but also with racism. And instead of coming to those people's aid, what did Nancy Pelosi see herself fit to do? She threw them under the bus. Instead of bringing them in and saying that this is going to be the future of the Democratic Party and that those of us that have been here for 40, 50 years are now going to move ourselves into the position of mentors, because we see that the future is coming fast. And while we may have institutional knowledge, these young folks actually had their ear to the ground. But instead of working together, she threw them to the wolves, making them absolute targets of the right, trying to silence them, have them be seen as their diversity mascots, but not actually fucking heard. So you have to understand that the reasons that we are here are so vast, but they're not to be laid at one party's feet or the other. They are to be laid at both of them. And so when you hear Chuck Schumer getting on television today, on The View, on CBS Morning, on this place and that place, he is doing nothing more than a shuck and jive. He is a liar that sacrificed our democracy to save his donors. And he wants to admonish us for having the audacity to pay attention. Because you see, folks, that is how a Chuck Schumer has been able to stay in power for so long, is by preying on the fact that people don't pay attention. All I got to do is hit the D or click the D or sign the D on my ballot and keep it moving. Chuck Schumer is a fucking traitor and a sellout. And I would love to say that his days are numbered and he will be primaried, folks, but that would be to assume that we are going to have elections again, which I am telling you we are not. The display of force that is being put on right now by this regime is to ensure that we are never going to have elections again. And I am telling you, and I will say it again, what Donald Trump and these men are hoping that surround him is that we gather the strength to link arms and show up in mass so that they can roll the tanks out. They are itching and waiting and praying for mass protests so that they can institute martial law and then all bets are fucking off. And do you know what I say to that? I don't give a fuck. People need to organize in mass. These little piddlings of protests that we're seeing this place and that place that have, a couple hundred people here or tens of people here. No. No. We need to do what the fuck they were doing in Serbia. We need to be millions strong. We need to shut this entire country down. And thinking that there are going to be elected officials right now that are going to swoop in and come to our aid, folks, that is a Hollywood movie. That is not reality. And for the people that keep asking, where is Obama? Where is this person? Where is that person? Doing exactly what they've been doing, covering their own asses, ensuring that their own families are safe, hoping that Donald Trump doesn't pull their protection next, like he did to Biden's children. No one is coming. No singular person is coming. And you have to understand, folks, this is a decentralized movement. And why is that? Because when you lay a movement on one person and at one person's feet, they kill that person. And then everybody disperses. So no, we don't need one person on a white horse to come in and save us, because they will take that person the fuck out. What we need instead are legions and legions of people that are willing and able to stand up and to show out in mass. You know, even right now, we see as people are gathering and they're protesting, and I appreciate it. But folks need to understand what we are up against. See these signs that were organized just several weeks ago for USAID workers, and most recently today, the judge ruled the Trump administration's actions harmed not only plaintiffs, the workers of USAID that are suing, but also the public interest, because they deprived the public's elected representatives in Congress of their constitutional authority to decide whether, when, and how to close down an agency created by Congress. So a federal judge once again has said what Elon Musk and Doge are doing is illegal. At the preliminary stage, the record demonstrates that, at least during the time period relevant to the motion, Musk was at minimum likely the official performing the duties and functions of the USDS administrator. Where the present record supports the conclusion that Musk, without having been duly appointed as an officer of the United States, executed significant authority reserved for an officer while serving in a continuing government positions. The court finds that the plaintiffs have demonstrated a likelihood of success on the merits of the Appointments Clause claim to the decisions to permanently close USAID. What does that say in regular speak? You were doing shit above your pay grade. Ain't nobody elected you. Ain't nobody appointed you. But again, folks, great. The judge comes down and says what it is that we all have known for weeks. What does the enforcement look like? Are you going to arrest Elon Musk for, I don't know, falsely portraying a federal commissioner? Are you going to do anything other than continue to issue orders and statements that are absolutely and totally ignored? I don't think so. So again, I ask, what difference does it actually make? Is it for the record that is going to be erased? Is it for the history books? But what I can tell you is that the people are getting pissed. And we're only 2 months in. And the people of this country are slowly beginning to wake out of their slumber. Yes, they are organizing. Yes, they are boycotting. We are fighting a fascist machine, folks, that is moving on all cylinders. So what we do next has to disrupt our regular streaming, has to disrupt our lives. It's going to make us uncomfortable. Because those planes and that they want to fill, they're not just going to be filled with the quote unquote criminals. But what I have to say is that they can't fill them up with all of us. Take a look at what happened in Las Vegas today. Several vehicles set on fire at a Tesla in Las Vegas. Now, I don't know if those Teslas are owned by people. I have no idea. I don't know if the Teslas belong to the people working at said dealership. But what I do know is like shit like this that I do not believe in is going to become the norm. Because when people feel unheard, unseen, and abused, oh, they're going to act the fuck out. They are going to act the fuck out. So Donald Trump and Musk and them, they are just waiting. That's why the movement, the action has got to be so big that it can't be contained. So far, we are relying on our friends across the pond to continue doing this because they're the ones that are tanking Tesla. And thank God for the Europeans, who are the largest users and importers of electronic vehicles, that are like, nah, we're good with the Nazism. Y'all can save that. This was where he closed out today. But do you know where Elon Musk is continuing to make his money? Our tax dollars, because he just expanded his Starlink contract with the United States. FAA, Pentagon. He has his tentacles everywhere. And who gave Elon Musk and the technocrats all of that power? It wasn't just Republicans. It was Democrats who said that their knowledge was essential. And now we're paying for it. A little funny aside, though, because there is truly nothing funny these days. So a Minnesota lawmaker this week, state representative, introduced a bill to label Trump derangement syndrome. You know, those of us who don't believe that Donald Trump walks on water and is the second coming of Christ, as Trump derangement syndrome, as a real mental illness and sickness. On the same day that this motherfucker introduces this legislation, he's accused of soliciting a minor and has been arrested for trying to have sex with a teenager. Only the best people. On Monday, a Minnesota state senator made headlines as he introduced a bill to label Trump derangement syndrome as a mental illness. Hours later, he was arrested. Senator Justin Eichhorn was arrested Monday night around 6 p.m. for allegedly soliciting a minor for prostitution. According to a statement from Bloomington Police Department, detectives were in contact with Eichhorn, who believed, quote, he was talking to a 17-year-old female. They then arranged a meetup for Monday evening, during which he was arrested without incident. Anybody ever see the thread and connection between all of the people who stand with Donald Trump and who he surrounds himself with? That they all seem to have a penchant for underage girls? And yet, they tell us, right? Folks in the queer community, drag queens reading to children, that there's something wrong with all of us. But I can list off the people in Trump's orbit that have been arrested for sex crimes, assault, rape, sex with a minor, pedophilia. Here is the thing that I want to close out with today before we go into our town hall. Willy Wonka, the original Willy Wonka, one of my favorite movies as a kid. because Willy Wonka and Wonkaland was filled, brimming with everything in a child's imagination. The creativity of that film, but the story of Wonka was the story of us. And how you conjure imagination, how the world is as big and as vast and as wild as our imaginations will allow them to be. One of my favorite lines in the movie is, "We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams." Our failure of imagination, of the belief in all of the lies that we've been fed, stopped us from imagining the darker side of America. Donald Trump has revealed who America has been. Just with different administrations, it has put on different masks. And we lulled ourselves into believing that we were better than we were when we elected, after 43 white men, 1 black man, for 8 years. We elected him, though, without confronting the truth of who America actually is. You cannot bypass white domestic terrorism and the centuries of violence and think that one election was going to undo 240 some odd fucking years. During that time, the Tea Party brewed itself into present day white nationalist MAGA. And what I'm saying to folks now is, I need you to dream not only about what this regime is capable of, but what we, the people, are capable of when we decide to come together. We are not great as a country because of whiteness or because of the erasure of Black people, Indigenous people, women. We are great because of all of that. And after this darkness, however long it will be, light will be there again. But we have to have the ability to dream it so. And understand, as this man, Martin Niemöller, told the world during the Holocaust, first they come for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Everything great and devastating comes from our imagination. You have to understand that there is no limitation to the cruelty that is going to be wielded. But there is no limitation into the country that we can dream ourselves into being either. With every obstacle, dear friends, there are indeed opportunities if we can imagine them. All right, that is it for me right now on the Danielle Moodie Show. It is Tuesday, which means that it is time for our town hall. So if you have questions for me, please type out question in all capital letters and then follow that with your question. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes trying to get to as many as I possibly can. Welcome to the damn town hall. Fantastic. Question. What is the dream, vision, hope you hold while fighting into the future? What will your future self see beyond the cruelty? That is a fantastic question. Eben Moss. What is my dream vision? My dream and vision has always been the same. I dream of a true multiracial democracy where all people have the ability to actualize their vision for their American dream. I believe in a just economy that doesn't have a hierarchy, that recognizes that we live in a country and a world that has more than enough food, more than enough opportunity for all people, and that we make choices every single day with who should remain on the bottom. So while I continue to speak out and fight for a future that I will most likely never see, I believe in a just and equitable world and country. Question. Why haven't more larger independent media like Midas Touch been amplifying the coordinated protests more with direct coverage, like the March 14th vets protests in DC and across the country? Great question. I have no idea what other outlets are doing, and I'm not in charge of them. I can only cover what I cover here, and what my friends at Mary Trump Media cover over there. I think that it's a wonderful suggestion, and I would encourage you and other people to ask them, to post and tag them in it and say, why aren't you using your millions of subscribers to advance this movement? And I think that some folks, right, while they report on the news and they may analyze the news, are not actually advocates and activists. And so you actually have to make, that distinction, which many of them do make. I am both. So that's why I do my best to try and provide opportunities for action on Thursdays, and why I do these town halls, because I want people to be connected, and use this show and this, chat and format as an opportunity to engage and build movements. But I don't know why other people don't do that. Question, Philip, can you imagine a true democracy that isn't a capitalist economy? Yes, I can. And, we have to understand that a lot of what we experience has been a long shot, right? Like, could those during the slave trade that lasted for hundreds of years imagine that there would ever be a Black man as president of the United States? Could we have ever imagined that, women would be able to access the right to vote? I think that, again, we have to be able to expand ourselves further than on what we see or what is being shown to us. And so, yes, can I imagine a democracy that isn't based in a vicious, grinding, capitalist society that only helps the top 1%? Absolutely. It's called a shared economy, right? And what they do is that they tell us that that is socialism and that will never work. Well, it won't work because those that are in power don't want it to work. But absolutely, there are people that have been talking about and advocating for a shared economy, one that works for all people. And so, yes, I believe that we need to believe it so that we can see it. Claire, question. What can we outsiders do to support those of you who stand against this regime? I believe, are you in Australia? Is that flag? Am I wrong? Or is it New Zealand? Because it's so small, I can't see. What can you do if you have the resources? Support organizations and causes, support independent media here, give resources, share information, right? We have no access to a CDC and a WHO, right? So share what you are learning and what you are seeing and your knowledge. But if you have the resources and the ability, do support with money, those that are doing the work and putting themselves on the line. Heather Cox Richardson says that we shouldn't abandon Dems because that's what authoritarians are counting on for us to become split up. I agree with your points, but fear it would help DT. Look, if Democrats want people to rally behind them, then they actually need to do something. Because to be honest, the Democratic Party has been split for some time. It's just now that people are really, truly like, wait a minute, y'all, like we are in crisis and y'all really not trying to do anything to help us. So it's like, we need a new party. And, when is going to be the right time? There is no right time because now we are actually in crisis, but those that were supposed to be the opposition have decided to lay down. So I disagree with her, and also trying to think about what a fool is going to do is like, it will just send you spinning, right? So we got to figure out a better path forward. Question. How is it possible to get the individualistic and non-communitarian American people out in the street the way they do in Europe, where they know mass action? Like I say, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to have to lose a lot of shit. And thankfully, this administration is demolishing things at record pace. So I don't think that it will be long. I think that it will be spring and summer that we are going to see mass action. And because by then, right, we will be like 6 months into this shit show and more people will have lost their jobs. More people will have lost their homes. And this manufactured desperation and despair that they're creating will really be hitting the masses. So I do think that we will see mass action soon. What are the best ways to get us to be a million strong in coordinated efforts? There are organizations, 5051, 5501 movement has been organizing the Women's March or has been organizing. There are different groups. What I want is for those groups to work in coordination with each other, right? And say, this is the date. We're getting our people out. You get your people out. You get your people out, and so on and so forth. But it's one day, right? Or one weekend or 1 week that these actions are going to be taken. But I think that there needs to be more coordination with these nonprofit organizations that do a lot of the work, Indivisible being another one. I know you've answered this question before, but was driving and couldn't take a note. What other podcast / news do you check out? I check out so many people's stuff. Right now, I'm really loving Substack and I'm really loving folks on Substack right now. I actually did a conversation with my friend Jared Yates Sexton and his newsletter dispatches from a collapsed state. You know that Wajahat has the left hook. There, Glenn Kirshner has a newsletter on there. There are lots of folks. Ruth Ben Ghiat has her newsletter that's on there. So there are lots of newsletters that I'm reading right now, and different pods and conversations that are going up on Substack that I'm really enjoying a lot. Jennifer, I'm going to take one more. after this. Are you and your family staying safe, and would you consider leaving the country if need be? My family and I are staying as safe as any other family is, and everything is on the table. Everything. But, you know, one of the things that I've been saying most recently is, you know, while many people will consider leaving the country and those that can and have the means will eventually leave the country, nowhere is safe, right? Like, this is what we actually need to understand, that whether it is Donald Trump wanting to invade Canada or Mexico, whether it is, you know, Putin wanting to take over Europe, like, nowhere is safe from invasion, from tyranny. And so there is a part of me, a deep part of me, that just wants to continue fighting the fight here, because why should I fucking leave? Right? Why don't they leave? Why don't they leave and go develop their own white nationalist country? Why do they have to take ours? Right? So, you know, I'm of two minds. Last question. Do you think that Schumer should have called out the name of the Republican senator? I mean, I think that Schumer should do a whole fucking bunch. But do I think that there was a Republican senator who said anything to him? No. I think that he's a fucking liar, and I think that he's a punk and a coward. And so whatever it was that was going to serve his bottom line and the bottom line of his donors, that is what Chuck Schumer was going to do. Plain and simple. Thank you, Susan, for this. April 5th, nationwide protest. So you all can head to indivisible.org and find out more information there. I deeply appreciate all of you. Today's show was jam-packed, so the town hall was a bit shorter than I normally like to do. But folks, I appreciate each and every single one of you. I appreciate every single dollar that comes through here. You know, this is independent media, and I'm doing this from the ground up, trying to build a movement and build as many subscribers as possible so that we can take mass action together. So all of you showing up, liking, subscribing, sharing goes a long way. And again, if you're looking for ways to donate on a regular basis outside of the super thanks and super stickers, please do consider becoming a paid subscriber at Substack, where I am putting up content on a regular basis there. And like I said, I have an interview that is up right now with my friend Jared Yates Sexton that I totally recommend. That is it for me today, dear friends, on the Danielle Moodie Show. I will be back tomorrow, which is Wednesday. In my head, it was Friday, but it's not. I will be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here. As always, power to the people, and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane. And in these incredibly dangerous times, dear friends, do stay safe. I will see you back here, 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Be well.